The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. The Lord appointed a further 72 and sent them in pairs before him to every town and place he intended to visit. He said to them, "The harvest is rich, but the workers are few. Therefore, ask the harvest master to send workers to his harvest. Be on your way, and remember, I'm sending you as lambs in the midst of wolves. Do not carry a walking staff or traveling bag. Wear no sandals, and greet no one along the way. On entering any house, first say, 'Peace be to this house.' If there is a peaceable man there, your peace will rest on him. If not, it will come back to you. Stay in the one house, eating and drinking what they have, but the laborer is worth his wage. Do not move from house to house. Into whatever city you go, after they welcome you, eat what they set before you and cure the sick there. Say to them, 'The reign of God is at hand.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Let us all be seated. Today we are celebrating the feast of Saint Luke, one of the writers of the Gospel. Saint Luke, as one of the Gospel writers, is symbolized by an ox. He was a doctor who became a follower of Christ and the writer of one of the Gospel that teaches us precisely how to love God and how to love one another. The Gospel for today instruct preachers that whenever they go to a place, a house, or a group to speak to, the preacher must greet those people there with the "Peace be with you." Now, peace is one of the most important state of the soul of a person. That is why we mentioned before, all Benedictine monasteries have the word peace all over the place. On the doorposts, on the walls, everywhere you find the word pax, peace, peace, peace. Precisely because monasteries are like the houses that apostles are supposed to go, in which they have to greet first the people, "Peace be to this house. Peace be to this monastery." Now, what is peace? Now, people, all of us, have a mind, an intellect, and we have a free will. The seeming place of the intellect is the brain, but it's not really there. It's just a symbol. The brain is a symbol of the intellect. And the symbol of the free will is the heart. But the free will is not really in the heart. Both the brain and the heart are just flesh, muscles, and so on. However, the intellect and the free will is really in the soul of man, in your spirit. And the spirit is something spiritual. It's not a muscle, it is not an organ, it is something spiritual. Those two are called the faculties of the soul, the mind. The mind is always looking for the truth, while the free will is always looking for the good. Now, the truth and the good are always the same. They are always in consonant with one another. So, when the mind is thinking of the truth and the free will is thinking of the good, the person is at peace. He is at peace. When the mind is thinking of something wrong and the free will is desiring something bad, then that person is not at peace. He has a war going inside him because your own intellect is fighting against your own free will. So there is a war going inside you, somebody fighting within you. And as St. James says, when that fight between your intellect and the free will is going on, then it comes out in the form of quarreling or fighting. So when you fight with one another, it is more because there is somebody inside you that is already fighting. Your mind is fighting against the free will. And so when we enter the monastery, we want to make our minds and our free will peaceful by making the two of them in concord with one another. They must agree with one another. So when the intellect thinks about what is true, the free will must say, what is true is what is good for me. And the intellect must say, what is good for me is always the truth. That person is at peace. And when a person whose soul is at peace because his mind and free will are united, that person is at peace. And St. Thomas of Aquin says, this is precisely the sign that you are already in heaven. Because the characteristic of heaven is that everybody there is at peace. Because all their minds are like the mind of God, thinking only of what is true. And everyone in heaven, all their free will only love what is good, which is also God. God is the true and God is the good. So when you are not peaceful, that is a sign that you are already in hell. Even if it is temporary, but you are already in hell because hell is a place where everybody is quarreling, because their minds are not after the truth and their free will is not after what is good. So peace is the sign that your mind is after what is true. And God is truth, and that your free will is after what is good, and God is what is good. So since God is the truth and the good, you indeed are just thinking and desiring God, and therefore you are at peace. And so St. Thomas keeps on repeating, that is the sign that you are a good person and that you have charity, meaning to say, you love God and you love your neighbor when you are at peace. And this always comes out in your faces. It's very easy to detect a person who is peaceful. That is why Christ tells the apostles, when you enter a house, see if there is peace in that house. How will the apostle do that? Oh, simply by looking at the faces of the people in that house. You can see a person who is really peaceful. And so when an apostle goes into a house, he must try to find out if the minds of the people in that house are after the truth, and if their free wills are after the good. And that is when he will begin to preach. Because a preacher is supposed to teach you what is true and what is good. And so if a preacher speaks to you and you do not like to hear the truth, Christ says, leave that house. Don't stay there. Leave that house, because you will just quarrel. And if a preacher goes to a house and the people there inside are not interested in what is good for their soul, leave that house. And that can also happen in a monastery. You must remember that Saint Benedict was told by a monastery of monks to be their superior. The name was Vico Barro. And the moment Saint Benedict there went and began to teach what is true and what is good, they began complaining. They began murmuring. They began to become disobedient. And what did Saint Benedict do? He left that monastery as their superior. So Saint Benedict did exactly what Christ tells us in today's gospel, that if you go into a house, into a community, that there is no peace, you must leave that place and even shake off the dust out of your sandals. So why are we here in the monastery? To find out what is the truth. We do not like lies, because the devil is the father of lies. We are not interested in anything that is not truthful. And here also we come to the monastery to find out what is good, not what is evil, but what is good. But how can you find out what is true and what is good? From Christ, who says, I am the truth and I am the good. So we directly learn it from Jesus Christ. So any house or any monastery, precisely those following the rule of Saint Benedict, should have that motto, which every house in the gospel for today should have: Pax, peace. And even in the Mass, how are we supposed to greet each other? Peace be with you, because only when you have peace can you be sure that you have faith, you have hope, and you have charity, which is the love of God. In short, it is the most infallible sign that when you die, you will have everlasting life. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.